Greetings, sisters and brothers. Mic check. Just trying to see if everybody can hear me right now. All right. Greetings, my sisters and brothers. This is your brother Khepra Ptah. And today, I want to bring on a special guest. But first, I'd like to thank Karmic Dynasty for allowing us to have this platform. So I want to start by talking about some of the things that we do, especially when it comes to the terms of what I call solarization. And this is for people who are mainly of African descent, but also those who may also take interest in learning and how to grow in the various traditions in dealing with African spirituality, dealing with the indigenous sciences and the ancient traditions around the world. And one thing that has accumulated in my understanding is what it means to be a whole person, right? To be holy is to be whole. To heal is to make whole. Holy is derived from the word Helios, which is the name for the sun. So, therefore, to truly be what is called holy or solarized, a solarized being is saturated with divine radiation. A solarized being vibrates in a higher stage of evolution, and this is concerning the children of the sun. The black people of the planet have much of the teachings of the power of the sun, but because of racism, our ancestors are written out and they have been ignored. If healing is to be made whole, then that would mean that restoring our memory will play a substantial role in our lives. So with that being said, I'd like to also talk about what's happening in today's world. Now, we're in the midst of a time where people are fighting over the nature of their rights, whether or not they should wear a mask, whether or not they should get vaccinated, and what is considered to be lawful, unlawful, and so forth. At a time like this, it requires a lot of not only introspection, but an understanding of the nature of what takes place in our world. In the midst of COVID, there are those who wish to have their rights to take action so that they could decide on whether or not to take the vaccine, and yet that being honored. So now more than ever, it will be necessary to have a sense of resolve and a connection with a higher plan. Not only a higher plan, but connection with a higher plane, being and thinking. And at the same time, we're looking at a critical product in time and history pertaining to the conditions of family. We're also looking at the spiritual nature of the family unit and how things play out according to the story of Osiris, Isis, and Horus, as the brother Babanu will be presenting shortly. With that, including the spirituality and science of our ancestors and how they dealt with the family resolve, and how the story of Osiris, Isis, and Horus not only is a very important story, but it has a very deep lesson and a wisdom to activate within you the understanding of universal principles and morality, and how to cultivate a society conducive to our growth and development. So for those who are interested in having further conversations, you may reach me on Facebook at Khepra Ptah. You will see my name going across the bottom of the screen with my email address as well as my number. So therefore you can contact me if those of you are interested in readings and consultations. Let me know, because I can also help you discover your destiny as well as who your spirit guides are, as well as the brother that I will be introducing. And by the way, I think it's actually time to bring the brother on. I'm trying to see if the brother's available right now. Okay. All right. So it looks like the brother hasn't made it in just yet, but it's very important because he will be covering the main course of the topic. Now, as far as where I have gone with the concept of what I call solarization, I think it is very important to educate ourselves, because we have been miseducated about ourselves, and not only of our history, but also of our potential. And this is key, because when a group is constantly lied to about their history, then that will naturally plant the seeds of doubt about their potential. And when we have doubts about our potential, we will lack the motivation about building a glorious future and how to have stronger family ties. So we're here with our creative potential and ability to reach new levels of awareness, to illuminate the very heavens, like how the ancient Cometians would say, making bright our mother Nut. Because you see, when it came to understanding of ancient Cometian or Kemetic philosophy, there was always an understanding that the family unit was important. So even when we look at the laws of nature, it pertained to family. So the deities or the Neteru or the gods of Yume, they were married. There was husbands and wives. They had children, and they functioned as laws and principles behind nature. In another system that survives, West African system known as Ifa, it teaches us that our ultimate goal for this world is to reach the perfect state. And humanity has all the information encoded in our DNA to break through in medicine, agriculture, engineering, and so forth to advance our species. And it's the innate wisdom within our makeup that led to the creation of systems of spiritual cultivation. And this includes spirits of initiation. So I myself have been through various forms of African tradition. My first love dealing with Kemet, and also leading me to explore Central African and African traditions of the Niger Congo, as well as other forms of spirituality worldwide, to see these common threads of as our ancestors migrated off the continent, taking their wisdom around the world with them, and so forth, and coming back and forth even. The history books tells us that the majority of our ancestors were brought here via the slave trade. They're detractors of this history. However, the fact is that throughout the Caribbean and the Carolinas, we see evidence that there are substantial amounts of people who are descendants of West Africa, for instance. There's also further evidence due to the slave castles of the coast of Africa, as well as African practices that involves the Orishas, the Loas, and the Ankisis of various African groups. Now, I'm not saying that there were not sisters and brothers here on the continent already. We see that our ancestors traveled all over the world. We see that our ancestors even built boats, okay? So I just want to make sure that people understand, that there's a fullness to our history, and it took place on a worldwide scale. But there's plenty of philosophy and wisdom coming out of Africa as well. I think that's something that we need to appreciate and we need to take into account, because it's conveniently ignored by the detractors of history who don't want to even admit that there was a slave trade. And much of the denial is linked to the shame of slavery passed on to us by our great grandparents. And it was a painful and humiliating time for our ancestors. And we have to understand that our ancestors wanted to forget the pain and the torment at the hands of the slave master and obeyed the teachings passed on to them by the slave master / colonizer. And that teaching was and still is forgive and forget. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and I want to take a quick break to see if our special guest has arrived. All right. So continuing on, our brother has not arrived as of yet. So I'm going to keep on going. So because we have forgotten, we suffer from an open wound that still has yet to heal. And there's another emphasis of the atrocious crime perpetuated by our on our ancestors. The oversimplified statement is they sold us into slavery. And this has led to many of us today denying anything to do with Africa and as well as our contributions to the world. And it must be understood that the power is in our ability to tap into that power and memory of our ancestors, as well as have a relationship with ourselves, our environment, and our universe. So this is the key to cultivating the power that we call Ashe or command. And this is where knowledge of our cosmologies and pantheons come into play. One example is those who we call the Orishas. Now, the West African Orishas are more than forces of nature. They are the intelligences that govern and shape the world, as well as sense faculties of our psyche. These intelligences existed as the same as the Netaru of Kemet, and they thrive throughout Africa in various forms today. The ancestors communicated with the forces of nature because they knew that they were a part of it. And through these initiatory systems, we learn that humanity has a divine origin as well as a divine destiny. Initiation is a method used by the ancients up until the present day to awaken our divine essence and sense faculties and bring out our godly qualities. Also, the cultivation of hypokinetic energy, Ashe, which is the word of power, meaning command. It was meant to make things happen. So when you say Ashe, that means make it happen, so be it. And it's also the Yoruba word for command. A person who has a certain amount of Ashe, they have to command to make things happen. And when you believe in what you stand for, 100% things happen because of the amount of energy is expressed through the intent of something put forth from the mind and heart. I don't know if anybody's familiar with studies that they did in an institute in California called Heart Math, but it talks about the ability of the energies literally from your heart center to affect your environment. We all have this gift, family, and that heart waves are more powerful and potent than brain waves. And this is important because we've been taught that it's the intellect alone that helps solve problems, but a lot of times it is the intellect that can actually put you in a trap. It is the heart that can solve the problems. The intellect deals with figuring things out, but figuring things out does not necessarily always solve the problem that needs to be taken care of. You can know something intellectually, but you may have a hard time accomplishing it if your heart and your mind is not aligned. See, so Ashe is cultivated through prayer, ritual, song, dance, meditation, and sacrifice. In the Kemetic Purim Heru, or the book of coming forth by day from night, it says, Dua Ra Ket Ubenet Nkut Atet Nbet. Praise be to Ra when he rises at eastern region of heaven. Purdom Heru, the book of coming forth by day from night. The Shepsu of the ancient ones appeared to see the sun as more than just a symbol of veneration and worship, and understood that it was the Lord of the solar system as well as intelligence that blessed this planet with life. Again, they see the sun, the moon, stars, and planets as a family. And it's important when we understand this because that's how the family unit on earth is supposed to operate. Unfortunately, when you have lost contact with understanding the laws of nature, you begin to see things in a way that is non-conducive to family. And this is where we live in today. We live in a society of weak families and therefore weak communities. When the family is not intact, that means that you will not be able to keep the community thriving. When you have weak families, you have weak communities. And with weak communities, this makes your children and everybody else vulnerable to the situations taking place out in these streets, as they say. So the sun was venerated as Ra to the Kamau, and Orun or Olofi to the Yorubas, and with a plethora of stories surrounding it as an anthropomorphic man-like being who goes through the virgin birth as well as death and resurrection. If this sounds familiar, this remains persistent throughout the history stemming from the ancient world, and we have not only humanized the sun, we've deified it, and in some cases we have demonized it, and so forth. Peace, peace, sister, more life. Great to meet you. It's beautiful to see that people are attending. You know, I'm still hoping that the brother comes on, but if not, we'll continue on because there's always room to build. There's always
Peace,
room to
Khepra.
share information. Peace. Peace, sister. Peace, sister. My aunt, I sat. Tefnu.
I know if you can hear me. Hete Poo, how are you?
Hatepu, Hatepu. I'm doing well. How's it going over there on your end? Am I coming in clear?
I'm on the road. I'm an hour from my destination. So
Uh-huh.
that's my status. And peace
Beautiful.
to everyone in the audience. I appreciate you all being here. I appreciate you tuning in. And I see more life is in here. Peace to you. I can't really see too far else right now. But I'm gonna be here for a few moments in the studio listening. So definitely
Mm-hmm.
take your time, Khepra, and with your
Okay.
presentation. And at any time you can end the broadcast. I probably won't be in here to end it myself, so you can go ahead and end it at any time for me. I
No
appreciate you.
problem. No
Gratitude.
problem.
Atumra
Gratitude.
Parhotep.
Atin Hotel. And by the way, I'd like to also greet everybody with Uncle Jasaneb. Peace and blessings to your family. I give thanks and praise to the ancestors, teachers, and guides, those who are here, as well as those on the other side. For without the help of my teachers, elders, and guides, I would not be where I'm at today. So I'd like to give thanks to not only them, but all those who take the time out to listen to this particular podcast or this stream. I say Hatepu. Now, a few minutes ago, we had spoke about the family. I also wanted to talk about the solar system and how that deals with our, should I say, our arrangement as living as families with structures in this particular planet and why it's important and why the family has always been so important when it comes to our indigenous ancient ways of life. But I would like to ask this, and we can all probably figure this one out. Why would the ancestors and the ancients create a story that's so similar of a being who comes into play as a born of a virgin or a very, very I'm looking for the word auspicious pregnancy, and then grow up to become the redeemer of the particular world in which they live in. This is common among the ancients, and it's because the sun represents the ultimate influence in the world and the power to sustain life. I saw what someone had mentioned earlier that this was on Facebook earlier. They were talking about Africans did not worship the sun, and that this was what Europeans said about Africans. And I think what it is that people are not necessarily homing in on the point. The fact of the matter is that the sun was seen as the life-sustaining principle or spiritual entity that represented the supreme being that allows us to wake up and help to grow our crops and make sure that we were not only sustained but nourished. But there's something else about the sun in which I like to cover a few minutes. So the ancient Kemet, Ra, the spirit of the sun, was referred to as Ankh, which is Ankh, Ucha, Seneb. Ankh, which is life, Ucha, which is prosperity, and Seneb, which is health. The sun sustains the world with photonic particles, in which we ourselves absorb as food. Yet it is the sun that raises matter in its rarefied state. And it is also essential to raise the vibration as well as our minds to a higher level of consciousness. And I like to say the sun in the sky, the human can also become just like we call them shining ones. We can become beings that emit so much light that darkness on all levels flee from us. And we are indeed solar beings, children of the sun. And we activate the spirit of the sun within us, and it moves up the spine like a fiery serpent, burning away all forms of impurity. And whether or not the average person knows this, the sun, whose light pervades the heavens, has major effects on our minds and bodies. Our sun is composed of mostly plasma, and there are four states of matter, which are solids, liquids, gas, and plasma. Gas and plasma representing the rarefied state of matter and being. And it is Ra's embodiment as the sun that activates our vitamin D. And it serves as well to meditate in its rays, for the sun activates the production of serotonin, which you need in order to function. When the production of serotonin has become compromised, it can cause illness and depression. In fact, vitamin D is necessary for strong bones in the African tradition. The bones are linked to the ancestors. Strong bones, strong ties with the ancestors. Strong ties with the ancestors, stronger families. Stronger families, stronger community. When your ancestors are not healthy, neither will you be, for the ancestors lived through us. So it is said that Ra, the spirit of our sun, travels the Dawat, the universe, and survives by going through transformations. And these are the teachings that speak on the planetary shift as if it is one main event. However, there's a lunar, solar, and planetary shift happening at all times. And when our Earth, which is with us, is constantly being bombarded with solar particles that go right through us, it affects us and changes us. The ancients knew about an all-pervading force in which today we call the electromagnetic field. Like the sun, the human body also generates heat. The human body is a conductor of Ra's energy. The life force is indeed Ra and functions as the internal solar sexual energy that keeps us alive and creative. We're all emanations of the life-giving energies of Ra. This would include the metabolic fire of life. Ra is the solar spirit that pervades all living things in our world. It is said that Ra, in his form of Atum, creates himself in a multitude of forms after making Ma'at his foundation in the Sabat M. Kemet, the wisdom teachings of Kemet. Ra is constantly fighting the dark serpent devil Apep, who comes to devour the sun. Apep manifests in our personal lives when we break too many spiritual laws. Apep is defeated by living the law and cultivation of the life force. We as the Ramach, the humans, are collectively Atum. We represent the supreme being in human form. Humanity and all living things make up the collective experience of consciousness. The world is a place of separation, but on the highest level, this separation is but an illusion. Unfortunately, due to economic and political agendas, it appears that the original people have been displaced. Those who put the earth under new management have done wonders by depleting the soil and polluting the ocean and causing the extinction of various life forms. And if we're not careful, it could lead to our end as a species. So the question is, what is it that makes us human? And what is the next step after that? we understand how we all have a connection and how we all can contribute to building a greater society, we must start somewhere. And that is making discoveries. The power to make discoveries go beyond the five senses. A lot of people think that it is mathematicians who will take us to the next stage. But no, mathematicians may have brilliant minds when it comes to calculating with facts and figures, but it's the engineers that are the creative ones. How are we going to engineer our world to become a better place? If we could lead to an end of our species because of a lack of knowledge of universal laws and principles, then we must also acquire a knowledge of these universal laws. Since many in this age are living off of foods grown in depleted soil that are also desolarized GMO foods, that is, foods that are lacking in trace minerals as well as other life sustaining elements, people tend not to be as vital as they were years ago. And that's because these denatured foods wreak havoc in the metabolic function of the body and distort the internal alchemical process of digestion. Food is transformation as well as information. This information that we put into our bodies affect our vibration, which is why different foods, as well as what they taste like, has an effect on not just our health, but how we feel and think. And this type of food in which we've been putting in our bodies just may be linked to why male and female relations in communities of indigenous people have been awkward, because one of the ways in which they attack you is through the food. In Nazi Germany, they fed the people tons of sugar. When you're constantly eating sugar, it breaks down your defenses, your physical defense mechanisms as far as your immune system, as well as it causes your internal organs to atrophy. And without it, after you've been eating so much of it, you start feeling a sense of depression because white sugar is a drug. And that's only one example. So it has been for about profit for the few in power. Yet the whole planet appears to be suffering because of greed and selfishness. It is not that prosperity is a bad thing at all. It is understanding the natures of Ma'at, which is law, order, truth, justice, reciprocity, and harmony. Pardon me. Reciprocity, law of exchange. In West African traditions, they teach that the world in which we live in is a marketplace, and it's the place that we go after this world, which is our true home. The marketplace is a place of exchange, of values, and so forth. But it's also where energy fluctuates. When you go to the higher realms and the highest regions of being, it goes beyond fluctuations. It just is. So when we're dealing with harmony, we're dealing with checks and balances within the universe itself. So we got to look at these things. Number one, as above, so below. We are all parts and parcels and fractals in an open-ended universe. Two, we are constructing our reality with our thoughts and observations. And three, our body temples are also light vessels that appear solid, yet we're held together with 14,000 pounds of pressure per square inch, with empty space between the atoms. We are individualized aspects of consciousness participating in a forever expanding nonlinear continuum of existence. So we learn to appreciate that within us that's truly great. Our solar bodies will activate and our soul will begin to radiate. At the root of human suffering is ignorance, and that which gives ignorance a platform is arrogance. Ignorance implies that one is not aware because something is being ignored. The arrogance comes into play when we choose not to acknowledge something that's necessary to enhance our own perception or to better ourselves. Modern academia continues to teach us that the ancient ones, that is, our ancestors, were too dumb and ignorant to accomplish something on their own, like build pyramids and so forth. And even though there's tons of evidence to the contrary, it would appear that the indigenous people of our planet have been compromised on many levels. And this compromised situation has affected the people from the education system to the environment, all the way down to the aspect of family and nutrition and so forth. The things that you need to keep you sustained on this world. The forces that serve to make prisoners of all of us are constantly busy working to keep our species deaf, dumb, and blind. And we see evidence that civilization has risen and fallen many times before the current one in which we live in. The ancient texts and oral traditions from around the world indicates humanity goes through cycles where it reaches a peak and then plummets, only to have us start back over again from scratch. This is maintained by the wisdom keepers of Kemet, the Ifa teachings of the Yoruba, the Mesoamerican teachings, and the Sanathan Dharma, also known as Hinduism, and many others. And when we look at ancient Kemet, we see a civilization that declined to the point that the art and science of building the pyramids was eventually lost. Yet at the peak, we see that its architecture and design puts today's modern engineers to shame, and there are always remnants of charts and diagrams showing our ancestors expanding their consciousness throughout the universe. The African, aka the melanated ones, are the mothers and fathers of civilization, and the civilization of our ancestors reveal a profound knowledge of how to conduct the flow of energy. The ancient ones knew how to create templates that worked as metropolitan circuit boards in what appeared to be temples, pyramids, obelisks, and reservoirs of water. All this made up the technology of a circulatory grid placed upon what are called ley lines. These ley lines function as a circulatory system that kept the energy moving in a way that the atmosphere was charged with huge amounts of energy. Being biologically tied to the sun, the African can feed upon photonic energy. We hold the key within our very genetic code to unlock the secrets, aka secretions, of our inner divinity. First off, the DNA molecule does more than create cellular protein. It works as a transmitter and a receiver. The wisdom teachings come to us in the form of religious texts and philosophical works that speak to our very sacred origin and a divine destiny. In fact, the fact that our species is equipped with so much power and potential, but it seems that for some reason, something happens that we become forgetful. We become forgetful of this potential. In spite of the fact that we seem to be making great advances in technology, we remain hunted by the enigmas of our past. All over the planet, artifacts are being discovered that have not been explained and are downplayed by mainstream historians and archaeologists. They continue to water down the knowledge of a past which mocks us with its secrets. So, as far as melanated people, aka Black people, are concerned, we have been disconnected from our own past, and there seems to be a suffering, and most from not just mental and physical ailments, but also social ailments. The people who are under demonic possession, oppression, and repression. Black people of today still suffer from the after effects of slavery and colonialism. When a group has gone through such an event, it will create a mentality, and this mentality is passed on from generation to generation via tradition and genetic memory. This has resulted in both internal and external isolation. Even though this is in mind, time and time again, we show and prove to the world both our resilience and our potential, and we find ourselves tasked with the mission to reconnect with the intent of the universe through the process of regeneration and mental resurrection and solarization. So, solarization via DNA activation, this could be achieved with the power of photonic energy, and later on, eventually, I'd like to share with you the power of sound vibration. So, I would like to keep in mind that we did have a brother that was coming on, and unfortunately, I'm not sure if there was any technical difficulty that may have prevented this from happening. I'm going to check on something really quick, and I'll be back to you shortly. All right. Okay, so I don't see where the brother has made it. Baba Nu, if you are there, feel free to leave a comment. If not, I'll just go ahead and continue. So, all right. I'm going to talk about the Great Pyramid. Also start talking about a little bit dealing with ways that we could not probably, but see results that can change things going on in our lives for the better. The Great Pyramid has been attributed to Khufu. For those who are familiar with pyramidology, they talk about the biggest pyramid in Kemet or Egypt of the Giza Plateau is the Great Pyramid, which is 144 meters high, 13 acres at the base, over 2 million blocks of stones and so forth. Yet, it is devoid of any writings on the wall, and it contains within it a very structure, a message of profound arcane wisdom that deals with measurements linked to astronomical events. We also see this in regards to our human forms, like for instance, the cardinal points of the Great Pyramid are inhabited by the four sons of Heru and their mothers. The four sons of Heru dwell within the human form and are the intelligences that govern the internal organs, such as the lungs, liver, stomach, and the intestines. These organs were considered so important that they were put in canopic jars in the tomb of the so-called deceased, aka mummy. We set our eyes upon the remains of the ancient Nile Valley. We see that they had these structures that function like computer circuits, as I mentioned a little earlier. We also see that they told time. The ancients had a superior understanding of mathematics and geometry, and they understood how to set up structures that penetrated the mind and communicated with the spirit. The ancient solar cities were always complete with pyramids because of their ability to channel, store, and conduct energy. And all of this was part of the circuitry of these ancient stone cities. They knew the effects of sound upon the mind, as well as the ability to shape creation. And today, the average person has limited knowledge of stars, scents, sounds, and shapes of objects and how they were placed. But we got to keep in mind, when we look at these ancient principles, we'll understand how things function because there was an order to things. However, most people may think about the effects these colors, sounds, and structures may have had on a subconscious level, and the benefits of being around these objects and having great consequences on our ability to fathom the universe, giving us a more in-depth perception of how things function. In the case of the ancients, if they were around today, they would show us that these things have an effect on our psyches. This includes the hills, trees, valleys, and mountains, not to mention man-made objects like cars, buildings, roads, and etc. Not only do these things affect the psyche, they also conduct different qualities of energy. In fact, to experience these things, they create memories not only in our minds, but also in our personal energy fields as well. The earth itself is a living being with an actual heartbeat. At some point in time, you want to check out the Schumann Resonance. So when you tone sounds like Om and and Amun, you're charging up the resonance field around you, you see. And when you're doing psychokinetic movement like Qigong and Tai Chi, what it is that you're expanding your energy field and preparing to take in these solar energies. For those who have studied Qigong or Tai Chi and so forth, and you experience a certain feeling of electricity as you move throughout the air, what it is that your body is adjusting to the frequency of electromagnetic field and where you're located at this point in time. And if you cultivate it well enough, you'll discover that not only you will be able to pick up on thoughts and emotions of those around you, but if somebody was in pain, you can zero in on them and feel their pain in your body, which you begin to see that there is a connection to each and every individual, you see. So the Kamau constructed their pyramids, temples, and obelisks to emit primordial sounds while being in alignment with sacred times and seasons, contrary to popular doctrine. The obelisks were not built to worship the penis. It was an object put in key locations to emit a resonance, like a tuning fork. If you take a tuning fork and hit it against something with the resonance, you'll see that it vibrates and makes a humming sound. If you put it next to another tuning fork, while the first one is vibrating, the second will vibrate as well. This also deals with people, because when you're on a certain frequency, when you get next to the person that let's say you have a relationship with, and you bring in negative energy, they can pick up on that. Okay? So, in a little bit, I think I'll be wrapping it up. Unfortunately, the brother wasn't able to make it this evening, and I hope that everything is well. And sometimes things happen. But there's 3 wonderful volumes that he wrote. The God Genes Decoded, Volume 1, 2, and 3. And I encourage people to look into these works, because he covers a lot of things. He talks about not only he talks about genetics, but he talks about our origin, and he also talks about our destiny. Let me see if I have a copy.
And he also speaks of science and chemistry. And anyone can check out one of the 2 videos he was on Karmic Dynasty. I interviewed him. Go to Karmic Dynasty on YouTube. And actually, he has his own folder playlist on Karmic Dynasty on YouTube.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does, Divine Sister. I got Volume 2 right
Khepra,
here.
you
But
have your own playlist over there as well.
Correct. Oh, yes. And this is Volume 2. But Volume 1, 2, and 3, I got all 3 volumes. This brother, and like Queen Mother said, he talks about chemistry, biology, and all these subjects that he narrowed into the first volume, and what it has to do with us transforming and becoming better beings and better people as we learn about ourselves and how to awaken that divinity within ourselves. Because at the end of the day, this is the destiny of each and every one of us if we choose to follow our destiny. In our current age, we see where our neighborhoods have become associated with crime, poverty, and illness. It is when you awaken your God genes, that's when you transcend that. But you have to learn what they are in order to be able to open up and awaken the God or the Osar within your being, the Haru within your being, the Aset within your being. So with that, family, unless Queen Mother, if you had anything else that you would like to cover, I'll be wrapping it up for now, because I want to save some for when the brother comes on and we can have a dialogue and discuss the wisdom in which he has in all 3 of his volumes, or his first volume at least, and talk about the family and how and what we can do to not just improve on our situation, but take things to the next step. Just like the brother, I also deal with ancient African traditions, and I've went through various forms of initiation. For those who are interested in readings, or that is consultations, you may contact me through the number that you're seeing going across the screen. And I would encourage you to check me out on Facebook and YouTube as Khepra Ptah, Khepraptah. For those who have any questions, feel free Like I said, you can hit me up on Facebook. You can hit me up on YouTube. Until then, peace and blessings. May you all have a blessed and productive evening. Hatepu.